Welcome to this week's episode of Safety Brainiacs. Today we're talking about a really important topic, and that is mental hygiene. With COVID-19 all around us, there's been a lot of focus on our personal and physical hygiene, but mental hygiene can be as or more important. Manitoba's Chief Medical Officer for Health, Dr. Rowson, has stated that fear is also contagious, not just the virus. Deepak Chopra said recently that emotions are far more contagious than any virus. And Dr. Christine Northrup, who, according to the Reader's Digest, is one of North America's most trusted physicians, has said that fear feeds the virus. Has anybody noticed that we also have a pandemic of fear and anxiety going on around us? As leaders and as safety professionals, this is something that we need to be highly aware of and helping our teams, our families through this challenging time. We as human beings have innate primitive survival mechanisms built within us that cause us to unconsciously and automatically be scanning our external environment for what can harm us. That, combined with the constant barrage of high drama news, can really send people's sympathetic nervous system into overdrive. And the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response. So our body is governed largely by our autonomic nervous system, and it's made up of two parts. One is the sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight response. It protects us from danger. And the other response is our parasympathetic nervous system. That is what self-regulates our breathing and our heart rate and digestion and urination. So when we're constantly exposed to the inundation of news and the anxiety that some people are feeling, whether real or imagined, it really throws our systems into that sympathetic overdrive. The body living in stress, or the sympathetic system, is the body living in survival. And when the body's living in survival, all the energy is shunted away from the vital organs and into the extremities. Adrenaline and cortisol are produced. Those hormones are pushed out to the extremities to facilitate the massive amounts of energy needed to outrun a threat. Blood flow is shifted from forebrain to the hindbrain, and people get very narrow focused on their body, their environment, and time. When people are in the stress response, they no longer have access to their frontal lobe or their higher thinking. So in the frontal lobe of the brain, that's the CEO, it's the grand symphony leader. It's where we experience empathy, compassion, our morality. It's where we can actually shut out the noise around us like fear. It's our executive function. It's where we solve problems, ask good questions, find good answers, are very creative. So when we're in that survival or stress response, we don't have access to that higher thinking. And can you see that would make our brains worse? It would make our problem solving worse. When we are in this sympathetic nervous system and we have those chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol rushing through our bodies, it actually downregulates our immune system. So in nature, we're only supposed to be in a stress response for a short period of time, long enough to outrun the saber-toothed tiger, right? Maybe 15 or 30 minutes. But these days, people are living in that stress response hour after hour and day after week. And over time, that just is depleting their vital life force reserves, and it's actually putting their immune response into a more precarious position. So for practicing good emotional hygiene, what we need to be doing is getting ourselves into the parasympathetic response. That is where the energy is in the core of the body. That's where our breathing is regulated, our heart rate is regulated. And we can do that just simply by slowing our breathing down, slowing our heart rate down, and focusing on the opposite kinds of thoughts. So thoughts of appreciation, of gratitude, of cooperation, of empathy, of looking for what's going right, of gratitude for all the medical professionals and all the essential services people that are keeping us going at these times. Our brain and nervous system cannot be in fear and in gratitude at the same time. So the purpose of this safety talk is to help you understand that there is those two responses. We do need to be tending to our emotional hygiene. And if we don't, more and more of our teams are going to break down under the stress. When we think about contracting the virus physically, we would have to touch somebody or touch some things or touch a service or be next to a person. When it comes to the pandemic of this panic and fear, we don't need close contact for that. This is happening in the collective consciousness and independent of really space and time. And it's being held even in our social media as a collective consciousness. So we can tune into the news, or we can phone a friend, or be in a crowd of people who are anxious, and all of a sudden we can feel that fear or anxiety, or we can even feel it from all across the world. So this is why it's so important that we understand that emotions are as contagious as the virus, and that if we don't control our emotions and manage them, we're just going to make the situation worse. So the better we are self-regulating our emotions, self-regulating our nervous system, staying in positive emotions, those positive emotions, gratitude, empathy, compassion, cooperation, kindness, they actually bathe the brain and the body in neuropeptides and hormones that are strengthening to the immune system, like endorphins and serotonin, dopamine, etc. Recently, somebody did a survey of approximately 30 CEOs, and the CEOs that were doing the worst with their fear and anxiety took in 5 times the amount of news. Those that were doing the best and most productive in their businesses took in significantly less media. So I think it's important to navigate this time is to get our news from credible sources. We need to make sure we're having facts over fear. So one of the big encouragements is to make sure that we're getting our news from places like the CDC, from the World Health Organization, from our local governments, getting what you need to know, and then limiting your access to the news. We know that every time we have a thought, it creates a neural connection in the brain. And if we have repeated thoughts, it strengthens those connections in the brain. So if we're constantly listening to the news day in and day out, the news we know they dramatize for the sake of ratings and to hook people in. So when we're constantly exposed to dramatization and high emotion, high anxiety, our brains are firing and wiring a neural network for anxiety and for stress. Those thoughts of anxiety and stress create chemicals in the body as they continue to run, chemicals of hormone and cortisol and so on. As they continue to run, it downregulates our immune system to be more likely to catch a cold or get the virus, but also over time, we almost get addicted to those thoughts of stress and anxiety, and what we focus on expands. So then the problem actually gets bigger than it really is. And that's not going to solve our problems. So what we really need to be doing is getting the facts, and we need to be focusing on our vision of the future. We're not talking about positive thinking here. We're talking about being sober, doing our part to follow the guidelines, social distancing, practicing good hygiene physically, and practicing good mental hygiene, looking for who we can help. You know, if we're in anxiety or fear, if we really check in, it's because we're focused on ourselves. So I think now is the time to really be saying, what can we do for others? What can we do in our community? Who needs us to show up? How can we best serve in our community today? If we focus on those kinds of emotions, those actually create the chemicals of endorphin, serotonin that will help us navigate this more gracefully. We're more likely to see solution because our brain will be working in a different capacity. We're more likely to be better problem solvers. So we want to recognize that there is a pandemic of stress going on right now and a pandemic of fear. Those emotions of stress and fear and anxiety are the emotional reaction to our environment. So number one, we need to recognize that. Number two, those emotions are creating destructive chemicals in our body that actually make our brain worse, make our problem-solving skills worse, and they downregulate our immune system. So then what is the antidote to that? We need to switch on the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's slowing down our breathing, slowing down our heart rate, slowing down our brain waves. We can do that in a number of ways. Number one, we can shift our emotions from fear and anxiety-based emotions to gratitude, cooperation, kindness, empathy, looking at what's going right in our world. The second way we can do that is you can even take a walk in nature. So when people go out into nature and they say, why do I feel so good in nature? Nature causes us to go into our parasympathetic nervous system. It calms us down. And the third thing we can do is practice mindfulness. And a simple mindfulness exercise you could do is really simple. You could just sit very quietly and slowly, close your eyes, slow your breathing down, tune into your body, feel your heart beating, notice your breathing, and breathe into the count of 6. Hold your breath for the count of 2, and breathe out for a count of 4. If you do that for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes, however long you do it, even right away, you're going to start to feel your parasympathetic nervous system kick in. Your breathing will slow down, your heart rate will slow down, your anxiety will lift, and you'll help your body to self-regulate. So that's this week's episode of Safety Brainiacs. Thank you for joining us today. If you like this content, please subscribe to our channel. If you'd like free resources, safe work procedures, safety talks, more videos on managing COVID-19 in your workplace, please subscribe to our free resources page on our website. It's all free. Until next week, go out there, be a safety brainiac. That's a highly intelligent person, so that you are a good influence on those around you, that you help everyone else hold the attunement as high as we can. The last thought I'll leave you with is that energy will rise to the highest level that's in the room. So be that higher level, and we're all in this together. We'll get through it together. Thank you for watching.